fixed requirements from clients in terms of diversity when you're bidding on business today?
So Anna, there is no, so it's a soft parameter, like I was telling initially, we can't quantify this as a dollar impact. Of course, every client would look at labor arbitrage or, what is the ROI we are bringing. But I think there is an increasing awareness, especially from our clients which are Nordic based. So if I take UPM as an example, there was a lot of focus on this. IKEA, which is one of our existing clients, there's a lot of focus on, but there's not something which is in a measurable way. So it is becoming, more and more actively spoken about in some of these conversations, but I don't think there is any parameter per se which will define that we are lagging or we need to step up a bit to meet the contractual obligation.
Anu, you're nodding.
No, I think this is a really important question because in India, as it happens, the formal labor force is very small. It's not more than 15 or 20%. And most people who work are actually in the informal sector without a lot of the benefits or protections that formal employers give. So as you think about diversity, there's only so much you can do as a company if you only deal with your own employee base. And it is really about all these soft elements of influencing diversity in the broader supply chains or, all the people that you procure from or distribute through. If you can use your clout and might to influence this, which we hear is happening in a soft way, but probably more can happen, it's actually really important. If you think about a labor force that doesn't have all these benefits of an HR department who, tries to drive this agenda.
I wanted to revisit what we talked about before, that this is really an activity and an act of, or acts of inclusion that involves everyone. And so I address this to everyone, and we'll start our Q&A session, so I really invite all of you to come up with questions as well to the panel. What comes first? I mean, is it diversity or gender equality, or is that a silly question? Does it depend on where we're at geographically, or?
So let me make an attempt. Number 7, yeah. So I think it will depend upon the context in which this question is asked, right? So if we look from the India point of view in an unorganized sector, I think the answer or reply would be quite different from if I say from the corporate point of view and living in this part of the world, right? Diversity is absolutely essential. The very fact, if I take again, IT-enabled services, this is one thing with most of the Indian IT companies are looking forward to, move their base from east to west. So we are looking for good quality of talent, diversity. From that point of view, it's absolutely must, right? Now, the same conversation, if it were to happen in India, I think probably my panel members would have a slightly different view because of the conditions that prevail in India. While there is overall awareness, I think society, the government, the NGOs are taking incremental steps, but there's a lot that needs to be achieved. We are, but good thing is a beginning is being made, right? We are far away from, what our final aim would be.
Does anyone else want to respond?
Like Rajiv said, I think it totally depends on where you are and in what context. I think diversity obviously is really, really important. If you're a company that's based just in India, you're automatically diverse because you're getting, it's completely based on the region that you're at, but you probably have people from all across India in your organization already. So you're fairly diverse. If you're an international company coming into India anyway, I think you can't crack the country without actually having Indians in there. So you need to partner with, so you're automatically diverse on that side. In terms of gender parity, I think it's the reason we're having this conversation is more so around that, according to me. It's something that's been highlighted over and over again because it needs to be talked about. About 4 years ago, I wouldn't even do a conference which had just women entrepreneurs because, it was one of those things that I wanted to be judged on being an entrepreneur, not a woman. But fact of the matter is, this is something that needs to be discussed. We need to talk about this. We need to get more parity in here in terms of gender. If you look at the stats, they're dismal. We're about 118 years away from actually getting to parity, which is really, really morbid. We need to change these numbers and change them, fairly quickly. And this is globally. I mean, you look at even the companies that have got investments, women-led companies perform better, but they're actually only 7% globally have gotten serious VC investments. So these stats are very dismal. We need to do something about those. And I think companies that are actually making an active effort to make gender inclusion, a very big part of and focus, like Anu said, there is financial benefit to this, which is not being realized. Facebook did a study which actually showed that giving women more maternity leave and getting them back as opposed to getting a new hire is actually financially more beneficial. But these are things that have not been highlighted. It's only coming into, the front focus now in the last 4 years. And so for me, this is clearly more of, I think that, when you look at it, the diversity comes through. And I think we're becoming more and more a global world. And the companies in general, we're all, the very fact that everybody's here is you're more global citizens, more global world. The gender part of it needs to be addressed.
So how can we change people's mindset in the corporate world, primarily, of course, but also outside the corporate world, that diversity and inclusion is not a cost center, it's in fact a profit center? What are your experiences here? What arguments bite?
Is this on? Yeah. I think what we've done, at least, is to actually have these conversations. Not to have it as a topic only on PowerPoint slides, but to actually have an integrated dialogue with everyone on these issues, and pointing out the business cases from our own company, different parts of it, but also from other companies. There are a lot of figures pointing in that direction. There's no questions about it. But in the Nordic regions, we have known that for quite some time. Then these are not new figures. So we believe that there's something else hindering us from taking the appropriate steps or fast-tracking this like it should be. And I think those issues are about something that is not easy to point at. And also that is why I think working with gender diversity is the first thing that you normally do, because it's something that you can easily measure at least. So that's something you can follow up on. While other type of diversity is more, well, it's harder. Start having these discussions. I think we can come a long way.
And this is, for instance, what you mentioned before, addressing unconscious bias as the first step.
Yes.
Is everyone in agreement on that one? Is that where you actually have to start with this?
For me, it has started somehow when the leadership in the company gets it and starts talking about it, and then moving it into the goal setting, because the awareness is so important. Because if you're just working, you may not even be thinking about it, that it's important. For me personally, it was for many years I had no concept of that this was something that should be happening. And then there was a discussion when we started to talk about how important it is. And then all of a sudden you get it in your head and you know that it's, of course it's important. It's kind of makes sense. And then the goal setting comes there, so that you follow up. And then it has to start with the leadership realizing it, because without the top management support, it's very difficult, I think, to drive this change.
And then you can, after that, you can really scrutinize all your processes and make sure to find, actions that you can start doing. It doesn't have to be, revolutionary things. It could be in the small things in your processes. And also to make sure that this is not, HR, I've been working in the HR field for 15 years. And these, previously, these issues have been, HR driven. But really to see that this has to do with our business. It's not an HR issue. HR is an enabler, both the processes and the people working in it. But it is truly a matter for our business.
I agree with both the perspectives. I think leadership commitment is where it has to start. Organizational culture will not change without that. And then a very systematic drill down into processes. But I want to add the third thing, which I think Anisha referred to, which is the wing it. Now, wing it is really important because in our experience as well, you have to think about every woman in the context of gender diversity as a segment of one. I mean, she is unique, her issues or whatever are quite unique. You do need the policies, but you need some culture that says, that you should be able to sit down with somebody and solve for your problem, right? Whatever it is. So you have to have that mindset of saying, I will solve for this person, this individual.
Right. And what does that take? Is that courage or what is it?
I think it boils down to, again, leadership commitment. We will make it happen. And then enlisting a set of people at the next level who are willing to invest the time in being these mentors or sponsors or whatever you want to call it, but actually then having those conversations to say, okay, how can we solve for this person? And this is maybe easier to do in certain contexts, like a professional services firm, much easier, the fewer people you're dealing with. I'm sure the challenges and solutions are very different based on context, numbers that you're talking about, and so on.
Want to invite the gentleman over here?
And my name is Stefan Mehr, working in media. My question is, I got very curious about the IKEA story about trying to get women to work after 8 o'clock. And could you give us a little bit of behind the scenes of the negotiations of that and what people, how do they react? Because you can sit here and talk a lot of good examples, incredible examples, but what actually happens behind the scenes when you, with your power, come and ask for such a thing?
Yeah. So we kind of discovered this after a while, that this was the fact. We didn't find out from the beginning. So it took a bit of time, and we saw that this is an issue. So what we did was actually, because we can't come alone and talk about it, because the government can very rarely give one company a favor or something. So we teamed up with the Retail Association of India, RAI, and together with them we worked on a retail policy. So it's a retail policy with a certain framework for retailers that we're now trying to push through. So it's not a single only on the women. So it's about women is one of the things. It's also like night operation hours. You're not allowed to operate a store at night for some reason. And there's lots of little issues.
But that must have been more of a give and take. First of all, how did you get the retail organizations? How do you, from what I heard, you probably have to provide security. You have to give something on your side. I'm curious.
Yeah. No, there's also for the BPOs and other companies, they are already allowed to operate at night. Retail is a specific area which are not. And they then have to provide home delivery. You have to drive the women home. That was an IKEA miss-saying, right? So you have to drive the women home at night. You need to have a man in the car that's not the driver. To the last, so there's certain specific rules when you have women working at night due to the security, and we of course have to follow these. So we're saying that when we're now going to extend the hours of retail, we will take on the same. Yeah? So we will follow the same procedures. We will secure that they come home safe and so on. So this is what we're giving in, and in the discussions with the bureaucrats where we are, they are all very understanding. They can understand that we can do it. Then you can say some of the bureaucrats can say that, we believe you. I'm sure you'll take care of your women, but what about the 1 million other retailers out there? Will they be able to take care of their women? So that's maybe where you have the discussion point, and how we can solve the organized retail versus the mom and pop shops maybe. And there is a little discussion on how we can maybe segment it somehow. But many of the states are positive to it, and we believe it's going to happen in most of the states where we are operating, and we are at least the first 5 we're quite confident.
Great. I think we have another gentleman here.
My name is Awais Sheikh. Originally, I am from Pakistan. So the honorable speaker did mention women are scared, particularly in Delhi. There are incidents of sexual rape and other things. So they don't like to go out of their home to the workplace at night, particularly. So. If I talk with the reference of Pakistan, yes, it is true. The religion is used. The religion, wrong concept of religion, that women are supposed to sit there at their home and look after their children, don't go out. This is against the religion. This is the wrong concept. of religion. But in India, which is said to be a secular state, so I really wonder why it happens. What is the main reason of this insecurity of women who don't go out to their workplace at night?
Well, let me correct that. Plenty of women go out. There's a very there's a lot of women that work in the BPO sector, as Rajiv mentioned. There's a very strong force there. So they all work night hours. Some shifts starting at 12 a.m. going till 6 a.m. So, these people travel at night. There's no such thing. That being said, when I talked about Delhi, I was referring to incidents that have happened in Delhi, such as a couple of rape cases that have been brought to front by the media. And I think it is good that we're actually talking about it in the media, because the more these incidents have been happening for years now. It's now that the media has brought this to forefront, so we are aware of it. Has it changed? Yes, it's made everybody a little more cautious, including employers who now are providing, like was mentioned by Patrick, just transportation back, making sure we do the same. There's cab service back, making sure that the women reach home safely. These things are good things that are happening. I don't think they're bad things, but there are certain incidents that have happened, such as life. You move on. That hasn't changed anything. For more so, the Delhi social scene and women going out is very much so there. The work scene where all the women work in BPOs or late hours is there. I come home fairly late, when a project requires me to stay. We do that. It's not like it's not happening. So I just want to correct that.
Please.
My name is Krishna, and actually listening to this Rang Sutra woman and this 8 o'clock and this Pakistan man, I have some knowledge to share actually. It's not a question or a comment or anything. Can I share?
Please.
Okay. It's better I come here.
Please come up.
Okay, this is about actually including women's participation. I'm not a comment. This is not a comment or question or anything. Actually, referring to your Pakistan thing, actually this is a case study on Saudi Arabia. There is an all-women BPO center in Saudi Arabia, started by TCS and GE, and all the participants are women. And Saudi Arabia, as you know, is the strictest country with respect to women's rules, right? And so I want to share how they did it actually. Actually, in Saudi Arabia, there is a rule saying that, even if a woman has to undergo some surgery or some hospital treatment, she should get the, permission from her husband or relatives in the sense father or husband and all this stuff. So what they did was they, while the interview process was going on, or they invited these husbands or these who are the stakeholders around that woman to the campus, and they assured that that things look like this, and then they bought in their consensus. And then that's the reason, one of the reasons for their success. And second thing was just what happens if a male visitor has to visit the campus. Right. So what happens is, so they used a stuff because male, he could be some serviceman or a plumber or someone, right? Or could be some. They designed a system in which they would announce these things in advance, and so that women would leave the room, or they would not be in the vicinity of those male persons. So this was like one of the main things that they did. And so they had rules like this, and especially during the holy month of Ramadan, they were given, women used to just leave because they had to serve the family after sunset, right, after iftar time. So, so what they did was they took all these measures in place and a lot of do's and don'ts, which convinced the government, even in Saudi Arabia, which is the, toughest rules with respect to women, right? And they were able to achieve 1,000 plus, and it's growing like. And recently the Prime Minister of India visited that center. I mean, so that's like, that's the case study. I just wanted to
interesting insights. Yes, thank you for sharing. Thank you.
I may be allowed to say something, just an observation in this right here.
Yes, please go ahead.
Just a very brief comment.
Yes, please. It's an inclusive environment.
Well,
Not very diverse, but inclusive.
That's true.
Incidentally, I have visited Saudi Arabia just last year. My daughter is working there. Now she has come to to Sweden. I was in her room. I really wonder, he's talked about women's right they are protected there and very good. I am sorry to say, human rights, particularly the women's rights, are not practiced there in Saudi Arabia. I just went in the kitchen and was washing clothes, and I saw that it's very hot and let fresh air come. I just opened a little window. My daughter just immediately rushed in. She said, "Oh, what are you doing? Just put it down." I said, "Why?" "You see, there is a notification that anyone who just opened the window and saw outside, he will be punished and he will be penalized." "Why?" I said, "I really wonder." They said, "No, because they think no man should see a woman, no woman should look at anybody else." Anyway, so this is my observation.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yes, please.
I actually have a question to Rangsutra, to Ms. Ghosh, because what's happening, what's clearly being seen from the panel is that there's a rural-urban divide now when it comes to women. The urban space, I've just come back from Delhi myself, and there's no problem for majority of us that live there, that move there. But when you go to rural India, and the concept of femininity is so wrapped up in family, and so wrapped up in your identity as a provider, what steps do you take to actually break that structure, and how do the stakeholders respond? In this case, local government, in this case, patriarchs of the system, because basically that is the new area for resistance, I guess.
Good question.
Yeah, so I'll quickly answer that. So initially there was some resistance for women to come out of their homes, go to a training in another village or city. But, as someone said, economic independence and increase in incomes just changes everything. So today in those same villages where women were not allowed to go, there are hundreds of other women whose families are pushing them to the centers that go there, you learn something, and you learn some money for yourself and for the home. So I think it's just a matter of a little push, a little opportunity there, because traditionally women didn't go out of the house to earn somewhere else. I mean, except to their own farms, maybe if they had farmland. So it just means taking a little step there. Government is very, very supportive of this. And I think the whole, social, the NGOs and others are also in rural areas creating a ecosystem for women to come out and work. So it's very positive.
I can add this with economic empowerment. We also have other suppliers in India, around 50 of them. And many of them are trying to get more women to work because there's actually a lack of workforce in many areas. And the way, first to convince the family takes time, but when the economical gain comes, it's very well seen. So it's about proof of concept, like to share that this works. Okay, and then it just starts to spin. But there is a resistance initially, but they've succeeded very well in getting women in. When they prove that they can make money, they come home, the whole thing changed for them, how their attitude, how they are treated in their family when they become a breadwinner all of a sudden. It's an amazing change.
Please.
Hi, my name is Purnima. I am a journalist, and I see that I'm sorry I came a little late, but I wanted to ask people in Sweden particularly, is that labor situation in India is such that organized, the ability to collectively bargain on the part of the workers is shrinking so much. There's 93% of our workforce is in the unorganized sector. And in a situation where people fear for their employment and economic insecurity is so high, women's rights, how do you actually practice in real terms? Like I I work in the media, and issues like structural sexism or glass ceiling or maternity leave, one would like to just ignore them and get on with it because you don't want to lose your job. It's a hire and fire policy. So in an atmosphere of economic insecurity, people fearing for the loss of their jobs, how do women negotiate their spaces and their rights? And what are the experiences from your country, which I believe is better than ours, and what we can learn from you?
So, Purnima, you said, right? Okay. I think it's a very interesting question and very interesting observation. One of the simplest answer could be the problem which existed in China or it exists in India, the 1 billion plus, it can be a magnet for getting the Western world to invest in, India and China. So, yes, European market, European organization in the jurisdiction we are talking, they have this collective, power in form of collective agreement, which definitely gives head and shoulder a start as compared to the bargaining power we have at home, right? But I think a beginning has to be made. It's very important. So in India, we are making slowly these incremental steps. Like some of these topics which are being discussed, if you look at NDTV, the kind of debate and discussion which is happening, probably, we would not have imagined 5 to 7 years back. And there's a lot of things which can arguably be saying why it is happening. So one is the spread of the social media, one is the awareness of the constituents that are being spoken about. So Europe, to that extent, organizations like Scania or Enrico IKEA, so they have a head start in that sense that there is a collective agreement or that bargaining power which is driving. But I think in India, we need to make a beginning. Not doing an action is not an option for us at all. So, government is doing its bit, which it can. 2 years back, they put some CSR, obligations. So I think as there is an increasing awareness, it's like, everybody needs to put in with their way, NGOs, government, or big employers like ourselves. And then, of course, individuals' own like and dislikes, preferences about this.
Patrick?
I think also the companies have to take responsibility. We are now a Western company, but we have the 50 suppliers we have in India today. And we have a contract between us and the supplier that's very strict. It's our code of conduct. We call it I-Way. And there we stipulate very clearly that all the co-workers have to have a contract. They have to have salaries above minimum salaries. They should have a bank account, so that we can really follow up also what happens. So we can make sure that the people they have there are under the rule of law and that they're actually well taken care of. And in the beginning, many of the suppliers think that this is really difficult. Why do they need to do this with me? But then they normally discover quite quickly that the workforce gets so much more motivated by actually being well taken care of. So they really support these initiatives. So we're going down in working hours and so on to make people get a better work-life balance. We make them get more payment, but it's all about getting the workforce really motivated, and they see better productivity. It's surprising maybe, but people work a little bit less, they do a lot more. So for us, it's this contract that has driven that success. This I-Way that we say, this is the conditions. If you want to work with IKEA, you have to do like this. And it has proven very successful.
Thank you. I think we're running a little bit on overtime, but we'll allow 1 or 2 more questions from the audience and then maybe some wrap-up comments from our panel.
This is an initiative discussion currently that's happening. I think more women and villages are still afraid to come up and tell about the racial discrimination or sexual discrimination that's happening, because the job contract is sometimes very shorter duration, so they're afraid that the contract might not be extended. That is also a reason, and also there's a social prohibition or avoidance by the public. If somebody comes up and tells, they might think that this woman is a little against the organization, or she might turn up a little bit aggressive. But once we start telling everybody that we will not be considered like that, I think that would be very good.
Ashok?
Well, you said my name. My actually question is more of a reflection coming from not present, but looking ahead for the future. Because listening to all these wonderful speakers, most of the problems that we have today is because of our values, our attitudes, our cultural, social systems, which I think we are trying to change today. But changing attitudes, I think, is the most difficult thing, as I think we all know. My question is, what are we doing in India today for the young children that are starting their life in the education system, are we including gender equality as something that's to be taken for granted? I'm just wondering.
Anu, yeah.
I think that's a great question because it's about childhood experiences both in the education system and frankly in the family that shape the attitudes of tomorrow's men and women both in terms of notions of gender equality. I think a couple of things are happening and probably a couple of things are not happening. So what's not happening, I don't think there is yet a very concerted effort to change, educational pedagogy and stuff like that and bring gender neutrality into that very actively. At least I'm not aware of a very top-down thrust to make that happen through policy. But we hear from grassroots practitioners who work in the education space and otherwise that there is a lot of attitudinal change happening amongst youngsters, that girls in schools are actually smarter, more assertive, more likely to do stuff, and you almost worry actually about the boy children because the girls are forging ahead, right? And I'm talking about rural schools, let's say in southern India, maybe it's different across different parts of the country, but it's great news when you hear something like that. I think the media is doing a lot to change. The media may have many issues that we don't like, but it's doing a lot to reshape attitudes. There is a campaign that's actually viral right now called, it's a P&G, a Procter & Gamble advertisement for their laundry product, but it's called Share the Load. And it talks exactly about this issue, about a father who regretfully looks at his daughter and his daughter's running around like a headless chicken. She's come back from work, she's busy doing 10 things and the husband asks her to wash his shirt, And it's like the father feels regret that he didn't do the same when the girl was growing up because she's learned these habits from seeing stuff in the house. So I think attitudes are changing. I'm not sure it's very top down, but it's happening would be my view.
I think we will need to wrap up with those final words, our future leaders, our children. So please give a big hand to our fantastic speakers today. And thank you also for your participation from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.